The saddest thing about losing someone isn't the day they leave, it's realizing they were gone long before that. The elevator doors slid open onto the top floor of Pierce Dynamics, and Claire Donovan stepped into the quiet hallway with the same calm expression she had worn for years. It was 6:07 a.m. New York City was still waking up beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The skyline glowed beneath a pale blue sunrise, and the office lights remained dark except for the small lamp she always turned on first. 12 years. 12 years of arriving before everyone else. 12 years of remembering every meeting, every flight, every anniversary contract, every crisis. 12 years of making sure Nathaniel Pierce never had to think about the things that happened behind the scenes. She carried a simple white envelope in her hand. Nothing fancy. No markings. No name written on the front. Just a sealed envelope that felt strangely heavy despite containing only a few sheets of paper. Claire paused outside the CEO's office. For a moment, her reflection stared back from the glass wall. The woman looking at her seemed older than she remembered. Not because of wrinkles. Not because of time. Because of exhaustion. The kind that settled into a person after years of giving pieces of themselves away without realizing how much they had lost. She opened the office door and stepped inside. Nathaniel's office looked exactly as it always did. Perfect. Immaculate. Powerful. The dark walnut desk sat near the windows overlooking Manhattan. Awards lined the shelves. Magazine covers framed the walls. Every achievement told a story about Nathaniel Pierce, the billionaire founder who built one of the most successful technology companies in America before turning 40. People called him visionary. Brilliant. Untouchable. Claire knew a different version. The man who forgot to eat when he was stressed. The man who worked through holidays. The man who never remembered his own birthday unless someone reminded him. The man who never noticed who stayed beside him when everyone else left. She walked to the desk and carefully placed the envelope at its center. Then she adjusted it so it sat perfectly straight. A habit. One of thousands she had developed over the years. Her eyes lingered on the envelope for several seconds longer than necessary. There, she whispered softly. The word disappeared into the empty office. Outside, the city grew brighter. Inside, something felt strangely final. Claire turned away and began organizing the morning schedule. Conference calls. Investor meetings. Board reviews. The routine moved automatically through her hands. Even now. Even today. At exactly 7:14 a.m., the elevator chimed again. Nathaniel Pierce stepped onto the executive floor carrying a phone in one hand and a coffee in the other. His expensive charcoal suit looked flawless despite the early hour. He was already speaking before he reached his office. Move the Chicago call to Thursday. Tell legal I want revisions before noon. He pushed through the office door without looking up. Claire stood beside the bookshelf reviewing a document. Good morning, Nathaniel. Morning. His answer came automatically. Almost absent-mindedly. Like breathing. Like gravity. Like the sunrise. Some things simply existed. Claire had become one of those things. Nathaniel dropped his phone onto the desk and finally noticed the envelope sitting in front of him. He frowned slightly. What's this? Claire looked at him for a moment. 12 years condensed into a single heartbeat. Then she offered a small smile. Something I should have given you a long time ago. Nathaniel glanced at the envelope again, unconcerned. Another document. Another report. Another piece of business. Without opening it, he set it aside and reached for his calendar. Claire watched him do it. And for the first time in 12 years, she felt absolutely nothing. The strange thing about being truly important to someone is that they rarely tell you. They simply show up, again and again, until their presence starts feeling as ordinary as the furniture in the room. Nathaniel never opened the envelope that morning. By 8 o'clock he was buried beneath meetings, market forecasts, acquisition reports, and calls with investors from 3 different time zones. The envelope remained exactly where he had left it, pushed slightly to the side of his desk beneath a stack of documents. If he noticed it at all, he gave no sign. Claire noticed. She noticed everything. That was part of the problem. At 8:17 a.m., she quietly handed him the revised presentation he had forgotten to request. At 9:42, she intercepted an angry client before the situation reached his office. At 10:05, she reminded him about a board member's anniversary after hearing him almost miss the opportunity during a call. By lunchtime, she had solved 4 problems Nathaniel never knew existed. Just another Tuesday. Just another day in a career built on making chaos invisible. Around the company, people often joke that Claire was the real operating system behind Pierce Dynamics. New employees learned quickly that if they needed an answer, they asked Claire. If they needed approval, they asked Nathaniel. Most of them laughed when they said it. Few realized how true it was. Nathaniel certainly did not. To him, Claire was simply Claire. Reliable. Efficient. Constant. Like the city skyline outside his window. Always there. Always functioning. Never requiring attention. During the afternoon executive meeting, Nathaniel stood at the head of the conference table presenting a strategy that would likely increase company revenue by hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 5 years. The room listened carefully. Executives nodded. Analysts took notes. Investors smiled. Nathaniel spoke with the confidence that had made him famous. What nobody in the room knew was that the original framework for the presentation had been created 3 weeks earlier during a late-night brainstorming session when Nathaniel was exhausted and ready to abandon the project entirely. Claire had stayed until nearly midnight organizing his scattered thoughts into a workable plan. She never mentioned it. He never remembered it. That pattern had repeated itself for years. 12 years of invisible contributions. 12 years of forgotten sacrifices. 12 years of watching Nathaniel receive standing ovations for victories built by more than one pair of hands. After the meeting ended, the executives slowly filed out. One of the newer managers lingered near Claire. "I do not know how you do it," he said with a laugh. "You practically run this place." Claire smiled politely. "No. Nathaniel runs this place." The manager grinned. "Maybe. But everybody knows you are the reason he can." Claire said nothing. Her eyes drifted toward the glass conference room where Nathaniel was already beginning another call. Everybody knew except the one person whose opinion had ever mattered. That evening, long after most employees had gone home, Claire sat alone at her desk reviewing schedules for the following week. The office floor was quiet. Soft lights reflected against empty workstations. Her phone buzzed. A text message from her father appeared on the screen. "How was your day, sweetheart?" She stared at the message longer than necessary. Then she typed a response. "Busy as always." A few seconds later, another message arrived. "Are you happy?" Claire's fingers froze above the screen. Such a simple question. 4 words. She should have answered immediately. Instead, she looked through the glass wall toward Nathaniel's office. He was still working. Still focused. Still unaware of the envelope sitting unopened on the corner of his desk. For the first time in a very long time, Claire realized she did not know how to answer her father's question. Some people spend years waiting for a sign that they matter to someone. The cruel part is that sometimes the signs were there all along. Claire did not answer her father's message that night. Instead, she sat quietly at her desk long after the cleaning crew had finished their rounds. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows like distant stars scattered across the darkness. Her phone remained face down beside her keyboard. "Are you happy?" The question stayed with her. It followed her into the elevator. It followed her into the taxi ride home. It followed her into the small apartment she had lived in for nearly 8 years despite earning enough money to move somewhere far more impressive. The apartment was comfortable but simple. A bookshelf. A couch. A framed photograph of her parents. A collection of old notebooks tucked neatly inside a cabinet. Most people who met Claire assumed she had no life outside Pierce Dynamics. They were not entirely wrong. For 12 years, the company had consumed nearly everything. The weekends. The holidays. The canceled dinners. The missed birthdays. The relationships that never quite survived her schedule. Somewhere along the way, her personal life had become something she planned around Nathaniel's calendar. She opened the cabinet and pulled out one of the notebooks. The cover was worn from age. Inside were years of scattered notes. Meeting ideas. Travel schedules. Personal reminders. Small observations she had written down during late nights at the office. She flipped through the pages slowly. Then she stopped. A date from nearly 11 years earlier stared back at her. The memory arrived instantly. Nathaniel's first major investor conference. He had been terrified despite hiding it well. 20 minutes before going on stage, he had locked himself inside a conference room convinced the presentation would fail. Claire remembered finding him there. Remembered sitting across from him, while he stared at financial projections like they were a death sentence. "You know what your problem is?" she had asked back then. Nathaniel looked up. "What? You think everybody expects perfection?" He frowned. "Do they not?" Claire smiled. "No. They just expect honesty." 20 minutes later he walked onto that stage and delivered the speech that changed his career forever. He never mentioned that conversation again. She never expected him to. Another page. Another memory. A winter storm in Chicago. A cancelled flight. Nathaniel sleeping on an airport bench after working for 21 straight hours. Claire quietly placing her coat over him because he was too exhausted to notice how cold the terminal had become. Another page. Another forgotten moment. Another tiny sacrifice. The notebook slowly transformed into something she had never intended it to become. A record. Not of business. Of affection. Her eyes lingered on the pages. She could see it now with uncomfortable clarity. Somewhere between the flights, the meetings, the crises, and the victories, she had fallen in love with him. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. Slowly. Quietly. The way snow accumulates overnight until the landscape looks completely different by morning. The realization should have embarrassed her. Instead, it simply made her tired. Because love was supposed to move forward. Love was supposed to grow. Love was supposed to be seen. 12 years later, hers remained trapped inside old notebooks and forgotten memories. The next morning, Claire arrived at the office before sunrise as usual. Nothing looked different. Nothing felt different. Yet something had shifted. She stepped into Nathaniel's office to prepare for the day and immediately noticed the envelope. It was still there. Exactly where he had left it. Unopened. Untouched. Almost invisible beneath a stack of papers. Claire stared at it for several seconds. Then she laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because somehow it felt symbolic. 12 years of loyalty sitting right in front of him. And he had never thought to look inside. The hardest part about being overlooked is not that people fail to appreciate you. It is that eventually they teach you to stop appreciating yourself. 3 days passed. Then 4. The envelope remained unopened. Every morning Claire saw it. Every evening she left it exactly where it was. By now she was no longer surprised. Nathaniel treated it the same way he treated countless details around him. If something did not appear urgent, he assumed it could wait. The problem was that some things waited so long they disappeared. Thursday morning brought unexpected excitement throughout Pierce Dynamics. Rumors traveled faster than official announcements. Employees gathered near coffee stations and conference rooms exchanging speculation in hushed voices. A major executive hire was coming. Someone from one of the largest consulting firms in the country. Someone Nathaniel had personally recruited. By noon the rumors became reality. Her name was Vanessa Hart. 38 years old. Impressive resume. Sharp reputation. A rising star in corporate strategy. Nathaniel introduced her during an executive meeting attended by senior leadership. Claire sat quietly near the end of the table taking notes, as she always did. Vanessa carried herself with effortless confidence. She spoke clearly. She smiled easily. Within minutes she had captured the room's attention. Nathaniel seemed particularly pleased. Vanessa will be helping lead several of our expansion initiatives moving forward, he announced. I believe she is exactly what this company needs for the next stage of growth. Around the table, heads nodded in approval. Claire wrote the words down without expression. Exactly what this company needs. The phrase stayed with her. After the meeting ended, Vanessa approached Nathaniel near the windows overlooking the city. They continued discussing future plans while executives slowly filtered out of the room. Claire gathered documents and organized schedules from her seat. Neither of them seemed to notice she was still there. I have to say, Vanessa said with a smile, you have built something remarkable. Nathaniel nodded. It has taken a lot of work. Claire lowered her eyes to the papers in front of her. A lot of work. Not we. Not us. Not the countless people who had sacrificed years to build the company alongside him. Just him. She hated herself for noticing. Hated herself even more for caring. The rest of the week unfolded differently than usual. Vanessa became a constant presence around Nathaniel. New strategy sessions appeared on his calendar. Private meetings stretched late into the evening. Discussions Claire would normally attend suddenly moved forward without her involvement. Nobody intentionally excluded her. That somehow made it worse. She was not being pushed out. She was simply being forgotten. Friday evening arrived with rain tapping softly against the office windows. Most employees had already gone home. Claire sat alone reviewing schedules when Nathaniel stepped out of his office carrying a stack of reports. Can you clear an hour Monday morning? He asked. Vanessa and I need to finalize the European expansion proposal. Claire looked up. Of course. Nathaniel nodded. She has been a tremendous addition already. Claire forced a smile. I can see that. Nathaniel missed the meaning behind the words. As usual. He continued speaking while reviewing documents. Fresh perspective. Strong instincts. Honestly, it feels like exactly what I have been missing. Something inside Claire became very still. Nathaniel never saw it happen. He never noticed the brief flicker in her eyes. Never noticed the silence that followed. Because he had already returned to reading the reports in his hands. Exactly what I have been missing. 12 years. Thousands of mornings. Thousands of late nights. Countless sacrifices. And somehow the thing he had been missing arrived only 2 weeks ago. Claire looked toward the city beyond the rain-streaked glass. For the first time, leaving no longer felt frightening. It felt inevitable. Monday arrived with clear skies over Manhattan, but the atmosphere inside Pierce Dynamics felt heavier than the weather suggested. Claire moved through her morning routine with the same precision she had practiced for years. Calendars were updated. Meetings confirmed. Reports organized. Nothing about her work had changed. Only her perspective had. Once, she had believed that loyalty would eventually be seen. Now she understood that visibility and value were not always the same thing. Shortly before noon, senior leadership gathered in the main conference room for a presentation involving several international partners. It was the kind of meeting where every detail mattered. Claire had spent most of the previous week coordinating schedules, reviewing logistics, and preparing materials. As usual, she had anticipated problems before they appeared. As usual, nobody noticed. The meeting began smoothly. Nathaniel stood at the front of the room while executives followed along on large screens displaying financial projections and expansion plans. Vanessa sat beside him, confident and composed. Halfway through the presentation, one of the investors raised a question regarding a regulatory issue in Germany. The room fell quiet. Nathaniel paused. The answer was buried inside a supplemental report that had not been included in the main presentation deck. Claire immediately recognized the issue. She opened her folder and slid the correct document toward him. A simple gesture. One she had performed hundreds of times over the years. Nathaniel glanced at the report and took it without looking at her. Then, with a small smile directed toward the room, he said, "That is exactly why we need stronger organizational systems. We cannot keep relying on people to remember every little detail. A few executives laughed politely. Nathaniel continued speaking without hesitation. To everyone else, the comment sounded harmless, practical, even reasonable. But Claire felt something inside her quietly break. Because the irony was impossible to ignore. For 12 years, he had relied on her to remember every detail. Every flight. Every contract. Every crisis. Every promise. Every forgotten obligation. The entire company depended on systems she had built and maintained. Yet in a room full of people, the contribution she had just made was reduced to an example of what should not be necessary. Nathaniel never noticed her expression. He moved on to the next slide. The meeting continued. The investors left satisfied. Executives congratulated one another. Another successful day for Pierce Dynamics. Another victory for Nathaniel Pierce. As people gathered their belongings and filed out of the room, Vanessa approached him with an approving smile. "You handled that perfectly," she said. Nathaniel nodded. "We are making progress." Claire quietly collected the remaining documents from the conference table. Nobody stopped her. Nobody asked if she was all right. She was simply doing what Claire always did, cleaning up the pieces after everyone else had moved on. Later that afternoon, she returned to her desk and opened her email. Her cursor hovered over a prepared draft she had written weeks earlier. She read it one final time. No anger. No accusations. No drama. Just a decision. Then she clicked send. Across the hall, Nathaniel's inbox received a new message. He did not open it immediately. He was busy discussing future plans with Vanessa. Claire leaned back in her chair and looked toward the city skyline beyond the windows. For the first time in 12 years, she felt strangely calm. Because some decisions stop hurting the moment they are finally made. The emails sat unread for almost 6 hours. Not because Nathaniel was avoiding it. He simply never considered it important. His inbox received hundreds of messages every day. Contracts. Investor updates. Market reports. Claire's email disappeared into the endless flow of information crossing his screen. By the time he finally opened it, the office floor was nearly empty. Outside, the city glowed beneath a curtain of evening lights. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair and clicked the message. The subject line was simple. Transition plan? He frowned. Then he began reading. The first paragraph was professional. Calm. Respectful. The second paragraph confirmed what he initially assumed. Claire intended to leave the company. Nathaniel blinked once. Then twice. A strange irritation crossed his face. Leave? The word felt ridiculous. Claire did not leave. Claire had always been there. 12 years proved that. He reached for his phone and called her extension. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. His eyes moved toward the glass walls surrounding her office. The lights were still on. He stood immediately and crossed the hallway. Claire sat at her desk organizing folders into neat stacks. She looked up when he entered. Surprisingly, she did not seem nervous. She did not seem emotional. She simply seemed tired. Nathaniel held up his phone. What is this? Claire glanced at the screen. My resignation. He laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because he genuinely believed there had been some misunderstanding. Come on, Claire. She remained silent. You are serious? Nathaniel asked. Yes. The answer arrived without hesitation. Nathaniel pulled out a chair and sat across from her. You are upset about something. No. Then why are you doing this? Claire folded her hands together. Because it is time. Nathaniel shook his head. Time for what? Time for me to have a life that exists outside this building. The words landed awkwardly between them. Nathaniel stared at her. He wanted to dismiss them. To explain them away. To categorize them as temporary frustration. But something in her expression made that impossible. Claire was not angry. She was not emotional. She looked like someone who had already made peace with the decision. That frightened him more than any argument could have. "You are overreacting," he said finally. "If this is about the meeting earlier, we can talk about it." Claire smiled gently. The smile hurt more than anger would have. "Nathaniel, this is not about one meeting." Silence settled over the room. Beyond the windows, thousands of office lights sparkled across Manhattan. People heading home. People meeting family. People living lives. Claire looked toward the city for a moment before turning back to him. "Do you know what I realized recently?" Nathaniel said nothing. "After 12 years, I finally realized something important." Her voice remained calm. Almost conversational. "You never actually needed me." Nathaniel frowned immediately. "That is not true," Claire continued as though he had not spoken. "You only needed what I could do for you." The room became very still. Nathaniel opened his mouth to respond. Nothing came out. Because for the first time in 12 years, he could not immediately prove her wrong. Nathaniel stared at her as though she had spoken a language he did not understand. For a moment neither of them moved. The soft hum of the building's ventilation system filled the silence. Somewhere far below, traffic flowed through Manhattan. Life continued. But inside that office, time seemed to slow. "That is not fair," Nathaniel said finally. Claire lowered her eyes briefly before looking back at him. "Maybe not. You know how much I trust you." A sad smile appeared on her face. "Trust is not the same thing as seeing someone." The words settled heavily between them. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. Frustration mixed with confusion. He wanted to argue. He wanted to point to promotions, bonuses, opportunities. He wanted to list every practical reason she should know how valuable she was. But something stopped him. Because deep down, he realized she was not talking about money. She never had been. Claire looked around the office that had defined so much of her life. The shelves. The awards. The city view. Every corner held memories. "Do you remember Denver?" she asked unexpectedly. Nathaniel blinked. "What?" 10 years ago. The investor summit. He searched his memory. Vaguely. "A little." Claire nodded. "You were terrified." Nathaniel almost laughed. "I was not terrified. You locked yourself in a conference room for 45 minutes. The faintest smile touched his face. "Maybe I was concerned. You told me you thought everyone would realize you were not good enough." Nathaniel's expression changed. He had forgotten saying that. Completely forgotten it. Claire had not. "Do you remember what you told me after the presentation?" she asked. He shook his head. "You said if the company ever became successful, you would never forget the people who helped build it." Nathaniel looked away. The memory returned in fragments now. Not clear. Just enough to hurt. Claire continued softly. "I believed you." The room felt smaller somehow. Nathaniel glanced toward the unopened envelope still sitting on his desk. For the first time, he noticed it again. Really noticed it. The same envelope she had placed there days ago. The same envelope he never bothered to open. Suddenly it seemed important. Claire followed his gaze. "Funny, isn't it?" she said quietly. "What is?" "That envelope has been sitting right in front of you for almost a week." Nathaniel did not answer. Because he already understood the comparison. The envelope. Claire. Both present. Both constant. Both overlooked. She stood slowly from her chair and picked up her coat. Nathaniel immediately straightened. "Claire." She paused. "I am not asking you to stay because of the company." The words came out before he could stop them. Claire studied him carefully. For a second, hope flickered somewhere deep inside her. Then it faded. Because she knew what came next. Nathaniel opened his mouth again. Nothing emerged. No explanation. No confession. No truth he had never dared examine. Just silence. Claire nodded gently. "Good night, Nathaniel." Then she turned toward the door. Her hand reached the handle before she stopped one final time. Without facing him, she spoke softly. You were the most important person in my life. Nathaniel froze. Every muscle in his body seemed to lock in place. Claire swallowed hard. And somehow, I became nothing more than a convenience in yours. The door closed quietly behind her. Nathaniel remained alone in the office. For the first time in 12 years, he did not know what to do next. Nathaniel did not leave the office that night. Long after the elevators stopped opening and the cleaning crew finished their work, he remained alone behind his desk staring at the closed door Claire had walked through. Her words repeated endlessly in his mind. You were the most important person in my life. And somehow, I became nothing more than a convenience in yours. He looked around the office as though seeing it for the first time. The shelves. The awards. The framed magazine covers. For years he had viewed them as proof of success. Tonight they felt strangely hollow. His eyes settled on the white envelope. Slowly, he reached for it. The paper felt ordinary in his hands. He opened it carefully and pulled out several folded pages. The first line stopped him immediately. Dear Nathaniel. Not Mr. Pierce. Not CEO. Not a formal business greeting. Just Nathaniel. He kept reading. The letter was not a resignation. At least not entirely. It was a collection of memories. 12 years of them. Small moments he had forgotten. Moments she had not. The first investor conference in Denver. The winter storm in Chicago. The night his father was hospitalized and he spent 6 hours pretending he was fine while Claire quietly canceled every meeting on his calendar. There were dozens of stories. Hundreds of details. Things Nathaniel had completely erased from memory. Yet Claire had carried them for years. Halfway through the letter, he stopped reading and closed his eyes. A painful realization settled over him. Every major milestone in his life contained Claire somewhere in the background. Every success. Every crisis. Every recovery. She was always there. Not standing beside him. Standing behind him. Making sure he could keep moving forward. The next morning Nathaniel arrived at the office earlier than usual. Claire's desk was empty. For the first time in 12 years, there was no coffee schedule waiting on his desk. No updated calendar. No neatly organized folders. Just silence. He told himself it was temporary. 1 day. Maybe 2. Yet by noon, problems began appearing everywhere. A conference call started late because nobody realized 2 executives were operating in different time zones. A client meeting had to be rescheduled after conflicting commitments surfaced. Documents went missing. Details slipped through cracks nobody knew existed. Employees kept asking the same question. Have you checked with Claire? Every time Nathaniel heard her name, something tightened in his chest. By Friday the company still functioned. Of course it did. But it no longer moved effortlessly. The invisible glue holding everything together was gone. That afternoon Nathaniel walked into an executive strategy meeting. Vanessa was presenting expansion projections. Halfway through her presentation, she paused. We should verify those numbers before making a decision. Nathaniel immediately looked toward the empty chair where Claire would normally be sitting. The realization hit him before he could stop it. Claire would already have verified them. Claire would have anticipated the issue days ago. Claire would have protected everyone from making the mistake in the first place. For the first time, Nathaniel understood something that should have been obvious years earlier. Claire had never simply worked for him. She had carried pieces of his life he never bothered to carry himself. And now she was gone. That evening, after everyone left, Nathaniel returned to his office and opened the letter again. Near the end, a single paragraph had been underlined. He read it 3 times. I kept waiting for the day you would see me the way I saw you. Eventually I realized that waiting was not living. Nathaniel lowered the page slowly. Outside the window, Manhattan stretched endlessly beneath the night sky. For the first time in 12 years, success felt very lonely. 3 weeks later, Nathaniel Pierce stood outside a small independent bookstore in Connecticut holding a worn envelope in one hand and far more uncertainty than he had carried during any board meeting in his life. Success had taught him how to negotiate billion-dollar deals. It had never taught him how to ask for forgiveness. After reading Claire's letter a dozen times, he had finally done something he rarely allowed himself to do. He stepped away from work. Not forever. Just long enough to figure out who he was when nobody needed a decision from him. The search had eventually led him here. A quiet town. Tree-lined streets. A slower pace of life. The exact kind of place Claire used to mention whenever conversations drifted beyond quarterly reports and corporate strategy. Nathaniel pushed open the bookstore door. A small bell chimed overhead. The scent of coffee and paper filled the air. For a moment he simply stood there. Then he saw her. Claire sat near a window arranging a display of newly arrived books. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floor beside her. She looked different somehow. Lighter. Not because her appearance had changed. Because the weight she had carried for years was finally gone. She looked up. Their eyes met. Surprise flashed across her face. Then caution. Then something softer she quickly tried to hide. Nathaniel walked forward slowly. "Hi, Claire." She set down the book in her hands. "Nathaniel." Mather spoke for several seconds. There were too many things to say and no easy place to begin. Finally Nathaniel held out the envelope. "I should have opened this the day you gave it to me." Claire glanced at it before looking back at him. "Probably." Nathaniel nodded. "I spent 12 years believing I built everything alone." His voice was quiet now. Honest. "The truth is I spent 12 years depending on someone so completely that I forgot to notice she was carrying half the weight." Claire looked away briefly. Nathaniel continued. "You were right. I saw what you did for me. I never stopped to see you." The bookstore remained silent except for the faint sound of pages turning somewhere in the back. Claire swallowed hard. "Why are you here?" Nathaniel smiled sadly. "Because for the first time in my life, I realized there is a difference between being successful and being happy." He took a slow breath. "And because losing you made me understand something I should have understood years ago." Claire waited. Nathaniel's eyes never left hers. "I do not want you back as my assistant." A faint smile touched her lips. "Good." He laughed softly. "I want a chance to know you as Claire." Emotion flickered across her face. Not certainty. Not immediate forgiveness. Just possibility. The kind that appears when a door someone thought was permanently closed opens a few inches. Months later, on a bright spring afternoon overlooking a lake surrounded by wildflowers, Nathaniel handed Claire a small framed object. Inside was the first page of her letter. The page that had changed everything. At the bottom he had added a single handwritten sentence. "Thank you for teaching me that being seen is the greatest gift one person can give another." Claire smiled through tears of happiness and took his hand. This time, neither of them let go. For 12 years, she had waited to be noticed. In the end, she found something even better. She found a man finally willing to see her. And Nathaniel discovered that the most valuable thing he had ever built was never his company. It was the life waiting for him beyond the office door.